We're just going to give a couple of minutes for a few more people to join, and then the session will begin. Okay, so this afternoon's POGO session is all about the public procurement of AI, which I know is a topic of interest to all of us. And the title of the session is Public Procurement of AI, Enabling Innovation and Managing Risks. So we're going to try and explore how procurement can support or hinder the responsible acquisition of AI technologies, the tensions between innovation and accountability, and the unique challenges of managing security and risk in AI systems. We've got a fantastic panel for you today, bringing academic and practical and policy expertise in this area. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Albert, who has played a huge role in putting this session together. And I should just say that this meeting is being recorded. Please do get involved in the chat and participate there. And there will be a brief opportunity for questions as well later on in the session. So Albert, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you and Rory and everybody at the PO Club for putting your platform at the disposal of this topic, which is very close to my heart. Just a couple of things to say. First is how refreshing it is to see the lineup today. I think I'm the only white, stale male academic, and that's probably best for everybody. And then the second thing to say is, again, being stale, I'm going to mainly talk about the book I wrote, which was published in January last year, which in AI terms is like, I don't know, 20 years, something like this. But just to try to be controversial and to give everybody else some cook to criticize the approach, I'll just present the most extreme interpretation of what I've been saying about AI procurement, which in short is we cannot procure AI well. And I'll try to say the main reasons why I think we cannot do it today and maybe ever. The first one is that when we are procuring AI, we are not procuring a thing, and it's very different from other IT procurement. Because in reality, what we are procuring is a socio-technical change in the organization that is going to be embedded in. And most of the time, this socio-technical change is going to be outwards facing. So it's going to have something of a massive impact on the community that is affected by whatever public sector intervention we are discussing. And that complicates things way more than buying a supercomputer or something that maybe people think is similar to that. The other complication here is that we don't know what good looks like. We don't have a lot of experience procuring AI, and we also don't even know what legal means, because in the UK, for example, we don't have rules on what AI can or cannot do. We just have principles-based regulation, and even in the EU, the rules have not come into effect. So we cannot take a compliance-based approach to procuring AI. We sort of need to do it as we go. And as a UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights report published last week, but I think it's from mid-May, said, around the world, there's over 1,000 sources of guidelines and ethical frameworks on the procurement of AI, which doesn't make the task of figuring out what good looks like any easier. The second reason why we cannot buy buy AI properly is that there's a massive imbalance between the tech industry and the public sector in digital skills. I think it's very hard to get expertise to inform from a technical perspective, what is it we're actually trying to buy, what knock-on effects it's going to have in terms of interpretability, technical debt, cybersecurity, and so on. So fundamentally, we are in the hands of the public. So the public is in the hands of private sector, be it because we bring consultants in, which are private providers, be it because we rely on the claims of the tech companies. So we are in a very weak expertise knowledge base to try to do this. And we are at the same time flooded by techno-solutionistic hype claims of what this technology can do. So it's very hard to have a sort of a sense check of what would make sense to buy, what would not make sense to buy. And the final thing to say is that because of that hype, there's a lot of pressure on the public sector to actually get AI. I'm sure Rachel will talk about FOMO later, and if not, that's her motto. I really like around it. But in reality, the whole strategy now seems to be AI is going to plug the holes we have in public sector budgets, which is it's not going to do it. But because of that pressure, we're just trying to go too fast. And I think we're trying to run before we can even walk. So that's why I say we cannot do it properly. Of course, that doesn't mean we cannot put mitigations in to try to do it better. And I think what we will hear about from the panel are going to be very thoughtful, focused ways in which we can try to chip away at some of those complexities. So we'll hear about standardization, we'll hear about knowledge exchange, we'll hear about thoughtful exploration of consequences. But in my view, the best thing we could do now is slow down. And this is a very unpopular message. The second thing is, I think we should create independent oversight of what we're doing. I think it's not good enough for every organization, particularly every public buyer, to just try to be faithful to the spirit of being responsible. I think we need someone to look at it from the outside. And the last thing is that we need to significantly increase our infrastructure for procuring AI and other things. We need to build capacity in the public sector. We need to improve the procedures and how we use them. And in that, the Procurement Act offers an opportunity. But we need to also improve the tools. We're trying to buy very complicated AI with e-procurement systems that are quite clunky, and the disconnect there doesn't really add up. So I think I've thrown enough for everybody to have a bone to follow, and I'll save any further thoughts for later. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Albert, for setting that up so beautifully, and also for sticking to your time and setting a good example to everyone else. I'll hand on to David.
Great, thank you very much. I'll try to take time. Thanks, Albert, for lots of challenge and food for thought, which I think what we're probably trying to do. I'll just go. I think we are trying to chip away at some of those things while recognising that there are some huge challenges you described. So, just to introduce yourself, I'm David Knott, Government Chief Technology Officer. I sit within the Government Digital Service within DSIT, Department of Science, Innovation, and Technology. What we try and do is to lead the digital data profession across governments, as well as delivering a bunch of citizen-facing public services, such as gov.uk and One Login and that kind of stuff. I've been doing this job for 2 years. AI has been part of the job since before I even joined, because I chose to join at a time when, shortly after the ChatGPT had catapulted AI into public attention. So I'm just going to share, I think, probably amplify on 3 of the challenges that I see that probably build on what Albert was saying. So firstly, this is an immature and rapidly evolving market to buy from. We don't know at the moment whether partners, products and pricing will remain stable from year to year. Companies, big tech companies are launching products at an accelerating rates. Smaller startups also launching products at extreme rates. We don't know which of those startups are going to survive, be acquired, or what the pricing is going to be. First challenge. Second challenge, we have an inexperienced workforce that has been taught over many years to be quite risk averse. That risk aversion is being countered by high ambition. So we have high ambition as government, and we have also people who are relatively cautious about taking risk. And then the last thing I'd say is that about the challenges is that the practice of AI is very underdeveloped. I'm a software engineer at heart. I tend to think it took most of my career before practices like Agile and DevOps and continuous integration and continuous delivery became the norm, and we established a norm for software engineering. I think we are some years away from the norm for AI. However, I don't think that means we shouldn't do anything. I think we should be moving forward. We have a high ambition. So to share some of those things we are doing, which I think are chipping away and hopefully doing a bit more than chipping away. So the first thing is basics. So one of the roles of my team is just to make sure real basics, such as can people trust the tools? So with some of our colleagues in places like the National Cybersecurity Centre, evaluate just the basics about security and privacy of some of these tools and make sure people know what they can trust and what they can't trust and what is going to happen with their data. And what we see is that's kind of basic hygiene. If people don't have that assurance, they won't move forward. The second thing is proving value. So in the AI Opportunities Action Plan published earlier this year, there's a thing in there called Scan, Pilot, Scale. To give an example of that, we did some work we've just published alongside Microsoft on one of the more popular tools, Microsoft Copilot. Rather than just adopt that without validating it, we did a 3-month-long evaluation with 20,000 people to determine, does this actually save people time and how much time does it save? Which conclusion it does. I won't go into the details of that. Again, you can read that online. That's available now. Third thing we're doing is, Albert asked for independent oversight. So we exercise some oversight. It's not external, but one of our roles in DCIT is to oversee government spending. So we run a spend assurance process. Government spending above a certain threshold all goes through us. We have adapted those processes to look at AI, basically are people spending money on AI sensibly? And then we've released some guidance. So there's a publication called the AI Playbook for Government, which we've released. Now, the qualification I put on all of that is that when we wrote the first version of the AI Playbook, which was called the AI Framework, I used 2 words in my 4 words of that, which are words that are not often used in government guidance. I described it as incomplete and dynamic. And the reason I used both those words was to say, we cannot pretend that this is comprehensive and complete. As an example of that, the state of the art in grounding, ensuring AI delivers reliable results. Generative AI changed about 3 times during the 5 months in which we were producing that, and has continued to change since. So we released new versions. So I think the point I'm making is that I think I'll probably take a less extreme position than now, but I think we can procure. I think we have loads of big challenges to solve. I think my view is part of the route to good practice is to practice. I think we can't completely watch and wait. We have to proceed responsibly. And I think some of the things we are doing are proceeding responsibly while acknowledging there is a huge amount to learn in a very rapidly moving field. Hand back to Anne.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Seema is up next.
Thank you, Anne.
Oh, there you are. Sorry, I couldn't see you.
Hello, my name is Saima Jaffer. I'm the Head of Commercial Policy and Capability at UK Parliament. The piece of the puzzle I'm bringing today is how AI procurement is lived and delivered through contracts and capabilities. This is the bit that answers, how do we actually make it work? During the marketing for this event, we were actually laughing about how I was once an undergrad in Albert's tutorials. I was the kind of student who kept asking, but how does this really work? Probably a bit too often. And now with Albert chairing, the tables have turned because I'm now expected to know the answer. Karma's real, folks. So how do we make this work responsibly? And as Albert and David both highlighted, in service of the people who rely on us. From my standpoint, the case for centralised AI procurement is compelling. When we've achieved centralisation, we've seen real impact. For example, creating gov.uk that David mentioned a few minutes ago to replace 1,800 separate websites. We need an extension of this approach, a public sector that uses its collective buying power to make sure that benefits aren't limited to central government. The model should learn from our approach to cloud adoption. The cloud-first policy was successful in the majority of central government departments thanks to dedicated budgets. But note the distinction and the limitation. The success was concentrated in central government, while local authorities, police, and the National Health Service remained less advanced. This pattern of central success with limited broader adoption leads to a fragmentation problem that comes with a very heavy cost. And I've scribbled down 4 quick examples here. First, the public sector spends over 26 billion annually on digital technology, but we have 44 different ID verification systems. Moving home requires you to contact 10 separate organizations. Managing a disability requires interaction with more than 40 services across 9 different organizations. And lastly, the average UK citizen spends a week and a half dealing with government bureaucracy every year. The cost isn't just operational, it extends to knowledge management as well. We're essentially reinventing the wheel across hundreds of organizations. This is a bigger problem in AI adoption, where the pace of change means yesterday's best practice is tomorrow's cautionary tale. There's a clear risk with centralization, and I can see some of you are ahead of me on this. The risk is that whilst we need the efficiency of scale, we cannot lose sight of context. My case for centralization is not a call for uniformity. We need shared infrastructure that empowers local adaptation and professional specialization. We can see this in practice at Humberside and West Midlands police forces, which have integrated AI in their telephone lines and shared learnings with other forces. The Government Assist AI software is built for communication specialists across all departments for use in marketing, media, and crisis comms. And to enable adaptation and testing, we need to ring-fence budgets accordingly. For instance, the NHS trusts will be able to bid for up to £21 million worth of funding to accelerate the most promising AI tools across hospitals. These examples show us the path forward. They also show us how responsible AI is about building the right capabilities structures to navigate uncertainty. Most importantly, it means keeping people at the core. It is citizens, public servants, and communities who will live with the consequences of procurement decisions. When we talk about AI ethics and transparency, we're really talking about trust. The question I posed at the beginning, how do we make this work, takes us in a clear direction. We must ensure that public procurement doesn't just follow AI innovation. As David suggests, it needs to help shape it responsibly, inclusively, and with care. Thank you, Anne.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Carrie is next.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm Dr. Carrie Miller. I am with the Center for Inclusive Change. I am the head of AI governance and research. I actually work with Giselle Waters, who's coming up right after me. So she and I worked on a standard for buying AI. She's going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about something a little bit more radical. My background for many, many years, I did digital transformation, which always went hand in hand with org design, change management, all the fun stuff you do when you enter a new ERP. And so as I've been watching this space, and particularly buying AI, something has come to my mind that I just can't shake. And it was talked about at the top here. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of centralizing versus decentralizing. In my opinion, this is a team sport. So you're never going to fully centralize. You're always going to need the subject matter experts that you're going to grab from the field, right? But what you do need to centralize is some of the critical thinking relative to the guts of AI, the underhood of the AI. And so this is what I'm proposing that we seriously think about if you are in a very large organization buying massive amounts of AI. There are, I would say, 3 levels. I would look at 3 levels of AI procurement and organize around 3 levels. In your first level, this is career pathing also. So in the first level, you have very basic low risk AI. Look, are you going to negotiate with Zoom and Microsoft and these kinds of applications? No, you're probably not. A little bit, maybe. But those are employees, professional procurement people who we can put in those positions and equip them with some basic AI literacy to negotiate those contracts, right? Next level. These are moderately risky AI contracts. Contracts that you buy the AI, it's commercially available, and you're going to configure it. Maybe you're going to add your data. You don't want them using your data to train their AI later. Next level, right? You need those professional contract managers to understand that. And so you give them a level up on skills, right? The next level is all out. These people need to know AI front and back. They are complex AI risk managers. And so you can see where this is going, right? And so as you funnel through and run your procurements through these various teams, what happens is you get more efficient procurement, you get faster procurement, and you get better risk-aware procurement. So these people are elevated to where they need to be, and your procurements can run fast. Now, does that address the need for specialty and context? No, it doesn't. But you can't be all things to all people. So someone that understands the difference between a CNN, an ANN, and an RNN, is it not also going to be an expert in automotive and health and education and deployment. Get those people with their specialties to hook up to that team when that procurement comes to life. So that's my preaching for today. I'm going to cut it there. Feel free to ask me questions later.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Giselle, you're up next.
Thank you to my partner in crime. Do you hear me? Yes? Okay. Thank you. I'm happy and honored to be here with such esteemed folks. I co-founded the AI Procurement Lab with Carrie, but it was born out of the near 4 years of leading the development and research of the first international standard for the procurement of AI and automated decision systems. That's 3119 at the Standards Association in the, and I'm going to explain this acronym, at the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, otherwise known as IEEE. It's the world's largest, for those that may not know, technical and professional organization, and it has a strong ethics first influence in AI governance standards and since 2017. In our 3119 working group, members from over 10 countries across these almost 4 years, including Egypt, Chile, and Argentina in the Global South, represented disciplines and fields such as human rights, social science, law, human-centered design, healthcare, AI, information tech, computer programming, and more. The point is, this standard I'm going to present from for the standards argument is really the child of incredibly diverse and balanced DNA. It integrated to produce a risk-based approach to de-risking the potential impact for negative outcomes that are unique to AI when you use, of course, AI at scale in the public sector, especially in high-risk domains. It requires a higher standard of due diligence disclosure about vendors' AI governance and their claims about their own AI solutions. It does this in 6 modular processes supplemented by about 26 tools, rubrics, templates, and the first uniform set of definitions in this field. That value offering is a robust guidance on how to adapt procurement, whether centralized or not, to the purchase of AI. It's the first consensus-based global understanding of operationalizing a risk-based approach to the procurement of AI. And the AI Procurement Lab and IEEE also collaborated on training in responsible procurement of augmenting support for teams that are trying to adopt the standard. So I would agree with David, and I would agree with Carrie, and I would agree with the professor that good practice can be established through practice. In the public, and even the private sectors, procurement is where impact, whether good or bad, is conceived, and where responsibility can be better defined, we think, in precise, tangible, procedural ways. It's a stepping stone, if you will, especially when needed to address the unique risks of AI at scale that serve the public interest. And I'm not suggesting that 3119 is the answer or the magic bullet, but it could serve to help promote responsible AI procurement policy across jurisdictions. It can be a set of tools, a mechanism for helping teams discern vendor and AI solution risks. I think procurement teams, for the most part, yes, need tremendous upskilling in this domain. And I would agree also with the professor that that's not happening yet. And we do need to slow down. And I believe standards can inform and at least go part of the way in making progress towards the prevention of the failures like Robodebt, Horizon, and the Judge case Siri, and de-risking potential challenges, even in current AI automations happening all over the world. Thank you for listening.
And thank you very much for your contribution. We're beginning to have an outbreak of agreement here. Next up is Kay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kay Sklar, and I work with Open Contracting Partnership. We're an international organization that supports governments around the world at all levels around improving their procurement processes for more equitable, prosperous, and sustainable communities. At OCP, I am the Senior Manager for Content and Insights. And the reason why I'm here is because I'm helping our organization develop some new, hopefully user-centered guidance around procuring AI. The reason why we're developing this guidance to add to the 1,000, I think Albert mentioned earlier, he's like, there's 1,000 things that already exist. But the reason why we're actually working on creating something new is that our partners have come to us still with questions. We're like, look, there's all these things out there, like really good things out there, and yet they still want help. So we've been looking into where the gaps are and bringing together practitioners from, in particular around the US and the EU and UK context to talk about where those gaps are and where some additional help might be needed. Yes, we're all in violent agreement that the procurement processes that we have set up today are not well equipped for us to by AI. But I think that same is true for technology generally. I mean, of course, there's exceptions. Yes, there's our shining stars, but in general, our systems and processes just aren't quite there yet to buy technology, well, much less sophisticated technology with all those extra risks concerned around AI. As we're working to develop this guidance, one of the things that we've observed that I think has already been mentioned here as well is how the field is really shifting and changing so rapidly that hard and fast rules are going to be tricky to nail down. And right now we are leaning more towards the principles side of things and thinking about what good principles might be as general guidance rather than those hard and fast rules. So with my 2 minutes or whatever I have left, I'll share some of the principles that we're thinking about that I would like to lift up. So the first one is using a whole of organizational approach. This means bringing together people early and often to develop a joint procurement strategy around what it is you're trying to buy and how you will buy it. Right now, unfortunately, this is still not the norm to bring your procurement people in with people buying the technology or going to use the technology and that technology expertise. They're not talking to each other early and often throughout the procurement process. So we think just tackling that alone in terms of buying better, we think would go a long ways. Another piece is focusing on the outcomes and articulating for yourselves or ourselves around what it is, what are we trying to achieve with making this purchase? Maybe AI is the right tool for the job and maybe it isn't, on the connecting back to the idea of slowing down of what are we really trying to do here with this purchase, and using that outcomes driven approach to drive technology and purchasing decisions. Number 3 I have is being open to agile, iterative and innovative procurement, starting small and opting for iteration, thinking about agile. We heard that great example earlier of trying out Copilot and seeing does this actually make a difference for us, and before rolling it out. But I think that can be echoed across other technologies as well. Fourthly, I have 2 more, one of which is understanding and managing AI risks. I think I'm actually a little surprised risks haven't been brought up or delved into as much as I had anticipated. So I will say, in addition to thinking about the risks that the super scary risks that we might all be thinking about of the societal implications of using AI technology, there's also the more boring risks of buying AI technology. What if your small vendor that you're working with all of a sudden goes under and your processes are dependent on that technology from existing? To life cycle costing, what if you get really dependent on them and they jack up their prices? So kind of not just, and thinking about both of those elements of risk, I would encourage that. The last thing I say before I let you go, and I don't know where I am in 5 minutes, is actively managing your contract. So we spend all of this time thinking about finding the right vendor, doing this procurement processes, but the real magic happens after that contract is signed and while it's being implemented. And I think that brings me back up well to my first point, which is that whole of organizational approach, right? So during the implementation, making sure that you have your procurement staff involved, you have that technology expertise that they're able to hold the vendor accountable, and making sure that technology is really working as it is intended, and helping have that proactive relationship with the vendor to ensure the best outcomes for everyone. All right, I'll stop there. Sorry, I was
Perfect.
speaking very quick.
Perfect timing. Thank you very much indeed. Mavis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Mavis Manchidori. I'm a senior researcher at the Inner Lovelace Institute, and our remit is making sure that data and AI work for people and society. And I think when it comes to this discussion on procurement, I generally agree with everyone. And so this is interesting. However, one of the things that really hasn't been talked about is what this looks like in practice. And over the last 6 years at ADA, we've started to look back at the use of AI in the public sector. And we produced a briefing earlier this year called Learn Fast and Build Things. And what we've been doing is trying to understand really what responsible adoption and use of AI looks like, and some key lessons around, understand the context in which that AI is being used, learn what works, because at the moment it's really difficult to get that evidence of what is actually working, why is it working or why is it not working. And I think at ADA, we always talk about making sure you've got public license to do some of these things that you want to do in the public sector. And then considering what life looks like beyond the adoption of AI. But when it comes to the actual procurement, one of the things that we did was a piece of work on the procurement of AI in local government, because we talk a lot about procurement in general, but I think there's sometimes these contexts that are sitting quite close to communities are really missed out. And some of these needs might be similar across the public sector, but there are certain kind of issues that local government is facing, which I think would be really great to continue to amplify so that we can find ways to improve procurement and hopefully, those lessons get scaled up. One of the things is that obviously local government serves diverse communities, and the decisions they make include safeguarding, care, education, and more, depending on the kind of resources that the local government is covering. And from our work, when we looked at procurement of AI, as Albert was saying at the start, it's not working. We see that local government has to deal with so much guidance. So already the over 100 pieces of guidance, we only looked at 16 of them, pieces of legislation in the UK that were available to local procurers. What we found, for instance, is if you're trying to be responsible, just looking at the guidance language on ethics and fairness and transparency across these 16 pieces of legislation and guidance documents, we found 14 terms, for instance, that related to fairness, 8 terms that related to transparency. And this wasn't always transparency to communities, it was sometimes transparency in relation to your tech providers, and more than 50 terms relating in some way or other to how you achieve societal benefit. So you can imagine that even since last year alone, from January this year, there's been already so much change in the landscape of AI policy and the context of deployment. So when you start to think about this as a procurer, where do you start? And this only heightens the concerns that we see when we start to talk to people on the ground, which is what we did as part of this project last year. And we found that the procurement, obviously, as others have already said, Kay in particular, procurement is more than just the act of buying, but it's this, socio-technical mesh of decisions that's happening, whether you should even be buying that technology, who's making that decision to buy it, do they have a say in how it should be used or where it should be used? And backing this up, we also have research from ADA with social workers in health inequalities showing that actually sometimes these decisions to buy, when they're not involving frontline workers or people kind of impacted by these technologies, the kind of outcomes that are then generated are not always aligned. So gathering all the right people in the procurement pipeline is one concern, but we've already heard that, and we heard people on the ground tell us this, that the market is actually arranged in such a way that these monopolies, especially in local government by a handful of providers, that tip the balance against what local government can ask for, what it can do, and how it can manage its contracts. So sometimes it's not enough knowledge about what you can ask for in the contract, but sometimes it's not also knowing what the AI is going to do once it's deployed in real life. So there has to be ways that we can deploy these and procure them, but also evaluate continuously and be able to have this flexibility in the contracts. And there was actually an interesting piece of a lot of missing public engagement on this to understand what good looks like, to then be able to have trust in those technologies. How can you do that unless you're involving communities in making that decision? And then just finally, the knowledge that is required to use these tools, as Albert has already said, is tipped towards technology providers. And so kind of to summarize our research, what we found was there's a really confusing landscape, like what is the AI? What are the associated regulations and guidance? How do you put that in practice? when it comes to the data governance landscape is really confusing. We were told by others that tech providers would sometimes almost hold councils to ransom, and councils would have to rely on the goodwill of providers to say, okay, so if you use this data, for instance, from our communities and you build this tool, what do we need to know to be able to then effectively monitor what's happening? And if you don't know to ask for that, your data governance practices are going to fall by the wayside. Some of this is because there was technological uncertainty in terms of what the AI was going to be doing once deployed. And this goes back to some of that kind of difference in the knowledge and expertise and the failures in the market where monopolies sort of meant that there was differences in what procurement could actually do. So to summarize, I think there is potential for procurement to do good, but public sector is so complex, and I think there are ways that we can start to understand how to make it work better by taking case studies and then scaling that a little bit more. And I think local government is a really good case study for that. Back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. And we come now to the final member of the panel, Rachel. Rachel, you're still muted.
Sorry. Hello, I'm Rachel. I'm called. I run a research agency called Chemical Industries. And we have been working over the last year with a number of people who procure technologies in government to understand what they might need to make that easier. Most lately working with Albert on a piece of work that I will talk about momentarily. And I think the most interesting thing that we have found, and it's appropriate I'm coming up at the end, is that there's a number of ways in which procurement is sort of over, right? So not for everything, but if you work now in a Microsoft organization, you are unlikely to be procuring as often as if you don't. As the capabilities of those ambient AI tools expand, you're more likely to be using and finding things to do with the technologies that you have, which means that very often procurement is not the issue. The issue now is thinking about adoption and rollout, which can be much more incremental, much more organic. It's much harder to govern. And David earlier alluded to the trial that's happened in GS, but I think it's very interesting to think from a purchasing perspective about what happens when government agencies and local government are doing product market fit for technology companies as a part of their work. So if you were procuring in the open, you would be setting KPIs, you would be very aware of metrics and the purpose of those technologies up front. And what is happening now is lots of great people are using the tools and the technologies they have to do a wider range of things. It's very difficult to be clear on purpose limitation there, and it's even harder to measure, because if, for instance, a tool such as Copilot is rolled out and then people are using it and adapting it, the things that will be measured will be the things that people notice at the end, right? We won't actually be in a place where the general effectiveness of the technology is understood. Something that we've been working on is thinking about how to make that pathway to adoption more conscious. And so if people are no longer purchasing, but are using and exploiting the technologies technologies they've purchased, how can guardrails be put in place to ensure public value. And I think most importantly, the elephant in the room is, if no one is procuring now, do we, how can the influence of monopolistic companies be managed and limited? And, is it appropriate that we think of other ways to do that? And I will leave that there. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. We have a bit of time now to collect up a few questions from the audience. So please raise your little digital hand if you would like to ask something. I noticed that we already have some great questions in the chat. So there's been a lively discussion about contract management that our panelists may want to touch on later on. There's an interesting line of inquiry about the relationship between AI and other types of technology procurement. Is this just the same old story, or is AI something really different? And if so, how? And some interesting questions around the management of risks. Is there a central risk register? Should there be? And how can we deal with the ethical risks that AI presents? I see Malcolm with a hand raised. If you don't get a chance to ask your question in person, please do feel free to drop it into the chat. And I can see David wants to come in too, but we'll go to Malcolm first and then we'll come to David Kershaw after that.
Well, thank you very much, Anne. It's been a fascinating discussion. I just want to make a couple of quick comments. As I put in the chat, I mean, I was involved in making more public procurement more innovative, which was actually driven originally by the digital research team in the European Commission 20 years ago, because they realize that deploying projects like AI is an ideal opportunity to actually have a proper pre-procurement process where you invite a number of people to present solutions, and because it's an AI tool, then you can evaluate the benefits of that. But above all, you have to actually be clear about the problems you want to solve first, and not necessarily get sucked into the idea that AI is going to be a magic solution.
A very good point. Thank you very much. David Kershaw, I think you wanted to come in. Can't see you, but I assume you're out there somewhere.
Yeah, don't worry, Anne. I'm always here, always listening. Thanks all, great session. Just to say, whilst the subject is slightly different, I don't think culturally, at least, this is any different to where we were with cloud in 2008, 2012. Culturally is really important. Yeah, it's different. We need cloud to do AI, right? Get that. But from my sort of on the shop floor type of experience over the last year and a half, all the things that you're saying are correct. But let's not get too excited. We've got a well-proven blueprint for doing this in the UK. We've been doing this for a while. We should not get too excited about trying to reinvent the wheel. All the risks and all the processes to repeat are there, and we should lean on the other nations that we work with to make sure we do this together. And the only sort of flag to say is I put something about risks. We hear risks all the time. I've not found a central risk register yet. Perhaps I'm not invited to that group, or there's one hidden somewhere. We need a special email address. I'm more than happy to sponsor getting that risk register together. I think it's critical. We've got some great minds, great experiences here. We've also got some great experiences out in the external market that want to play in this space. I think we need it. We can't move forwards in any of this area until we know what the risks are. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do now is just go back around our panelists in the same order that we went through before. So there should be between 1 and 2 minutes each for you to respond to the questions that we've had in the chat or verbally, or to respond to each other's points. So Albert, back to you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you everybody for really good and very complimentary insights and questions. I would just pick up on 2 things. One is about the whole thing about, is AI and tech different, or is this like cloud, or is it something else? I think what AI is a mirror. And I think what AI is doing is that it's showing us how procurement is broken in many ways. And in the UK, the reform is trying to fix some of those things. But seriously, unless we have a significant investment, unless we have, the procurement profession is recognized, we will just keep only discussing it when there's the next scandal. And I think that's what AI is showing to me. We were already sort of trying to pull ourselves by our bootstraps, doing other things. Now this is just bigger than we can manage without more resource. So it goes back to the point on what is the infrastructure that we have to try to deal with this problem. And that's something that Nathan and I have been working on. So we may even share a paper on that. But then the other one is about AI as the magic solution. And I think that's also an underlying narrative, right? It's AI is going to fix the budget problem. AI is going to do things we cannot even imagine. You need to tell the AI exactly what you want it to do. Otherwise, it's going to do nothing. And most of the time, we know the problem, but we don't know the solution. So how is AI going to tell us what the solution is? Otherwise, just fire all of the policy advisors and ask Copilot. But that's the worst advice anybody could give you. So I think we just need more grounded, slow down, good conversations like today to keep moving forward.
Thank you very much indeed. David, any concluding reflections from you?
Yeah, so firstly, fantastic conversation. Thanks for all the comments and provoking thoughts. So a couple of thoughts from me. Lots of discussion on contract management. I completely agree. To be honest, I thought this throughout my career. Whenever you buy anything these days, you're not buying a one-off product, you're buying a pipeline, you're buying something that will change over time, you're buying a relationship. It is natural to over-index on the selection and contracting part of the life cycle rather than contract management part of the life cycle. I put my hand up as I think government is probably more guilty of that than the private sector. But actually, we should always remember, so we're buying into a full relationship that needs continuous management. Second thought, I put this in the chat, I think AI is distinctive for a number of ways. The key thing for me, I've been buying technology products for decades now. For most of my career, you know the precise behavior of what you're buying. If it doesn't exhibit that behavior, then there's something broken, it's a bug, and you ask the manufacturer to fix it. With AI, we are buying products with deliberately open-ended behavior. So it's difficult to know when is it behaving out of the bounds of what you've bought, which brings some new insight. I got off a slightly dissenting voice on the need to understand purpose. I think use of AI, particularly in its assistive capacity, is finding its feet as another general purpose technology. I talk as a software engineer at heart. In my software engineering profession, people are increasingly using AI as the general purpose assistant to help them with coding. I think the precise ways they use that varies from person to person and use case to use case. I think people are discovering this the same way as they discovered the value of integrated development environments or spreadsheets or word processors. We didn't know what everybody was going to write with word processors when we started giving them word processors, and it turned out they would figure it out for themselves. So I don't think we can or should need to know precisely what people are going to use it for. I think we need to know better the boundaries of behaviour. Again, thanks. Oh, sorry, last thought. David Kershaw, I don't think there is, I agree with you, I don't think there is a central risk register. There is a national risk register in the UK for AI risks that tends to focus on the bigger, more existential risks like the use of AI for terrorism and bioengineering and all that kind of stuff. I don't think we anywhere have a comprehensive risk register that covers multiple dimensions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Well, not fantastic about the risk register, but thank you for your thoughts. Saima.
Thank you. For me, what's really exciting about this particular space is the fact that we're ring-fencing innovation budgets. And there's sort of space to test things out. So if a pilot fails, that's learning and not a procurement failure, provided we capture and share those lessons. And that's really exciting to sort of hear that in the public sector, where we've spent so much time sort of being risk averse and obviously having to worry about how we're spending public money and being very, very careful with making sure that we're careful with how that's spent. So having that space to be able to test and learn and be able to take calculated risks is really important. The key to how we do this, how we sort of ring fence our innovation budgets, is being transparent about our approach, both with suppliers and stakeholders, and sort of have people understand how we're taking those calculated risks to ensure that we're actually delivering better services and also value for money as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Carrie.
Sure. So I want to address two areas. One is, how is AI different than traditional technology? Right off the top, three things. we have systemically biased data. Historically, we're not good humans most of the time, and that's embedded in the data, sorry to say. And that's what AI runs on. That's the gas in the tank. We have autonomous reasoning now in the agents that are coming to bear. That's never been in a traditional technology system. And we have brand new security attack vectors. We've never, to date, until AI came about, talked about data poisoning or model invasions or inversions or backdoor attacks. So there are marked differences between what was then and what is today. The second thing I'd add to this conversation, the National Risk Register, this is like chasing Tinkerbell riding a unicorn. Like, I don't know what we think we're after when we talk about a risk register. Every procurement is unique. It's kind of like market opportunities. You have a unique product, you have a unique industry, you have a unique set of buyers. It's like cooking a dish, right? How much salt you add, how much pepper you add, whether the chef is good or bad. Every procurement is different. You have to assess what's going on. Who are these vendors? Who are my buyers? Who are my users? Are they literate? Are they not literate? Is my buyer using good cloud, bad cloud? I mean, your risks are very nuanced within the procurement. So the risk register isn't going to help you when your rubber is on the road and you're driving your car. You have to look and do the hard work and the critical thinking. So you use your taxonomy and your foundation of understanding of what risks look like, and then you marry that with what your conditions are today. So that's my, again, preaching. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Giselle.
She does this to me every time. I can't follow her humor. It just, she steals it. That's I can't. She's fantastic. Thank you for that. I guess I didn't want to end with comments. I really wanted to end with a bunch of questions. And in some ways they're about how is it that we get to this wild west of this unskilled, inexperienced workforce that needs to slow down to an independent authority and all the decades that might include the time in between. Is it that governments are thinking about building comprehensive AI procurement Navy SEALs, for example, that begin at the highest risk context and sets of domains, maybe, and focus as the wonderful example that David Knott shared with us about the co-pilot, that 3-month intense look at whether or not, you know, there's going to be some seriously negative impacts to using it. Look forward to reading the concluding results of that. So how is it that we get to where we are to where we could be? And I think that parts of the way, one of the answers is, of course, using things like blueprints as standards have been used for many, many, many decades across all sorts of areas, technology, engineering, medicine, and so on and so forth. So I look forward to hopefully continuing the conversation with at least some of you. Thank you for having us.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Kay is next.
I feel like there's so many things to talk about. I feel bad trying to like pick up just one thread. But one thing that I'm still thinking about is like that challenge of like wanting to go slowly and also combining it with the reality on the ground of governments and people in governments at all levels buying this technology, whether or not they are really aware of it, because we know that more and more companies are just putting AI into their technology. So in some senses, I know we're talking here about purchasing AI technology, but there's a way in which so much of just purchasing AI technology is going to be purchasing technology. It's going to be really challenging to like tease apart what is AI and what isn't as more and more tech companies put it in there, whether or not people are asking for it. So there is, at the same time, like, yes, I like the idea of like going slow. At the same time, we have to like go really fast to deal with the challenge because it's happening to us from the vendor side, whether or not people in government are asking for it. So that's something that is on my mind is thinking about that challenge.
Yeah, that's a great point. We can't hold back the tide. Thank you so much. Mavis, it's your turn.
Thank you. So perhaps unsurprisingly, we've been thinking also about some of these issues at ADA. I think the culture piece is really interesting because when it comes to sort of the cultures of, digital and technology landscapes, actually there isn't that much difference. I think a lot of kind of angst that came out in our research was around digital leads just telling people who are doing the procurement to just get a tool, and you're like, oh wait, you've got all these processes that already exist, or you're supposed to do commissioning and all that. Why is that not being used? So there are these I want to say power plays that still happen within different departments, within local government, where actually procurers, we say, have this immense responsibility, but the actual power that they have as individuals is very minimal. So there's something interesting there about how we actually enable them to make the right decisions. And then one of the things that I think is interesting is thinking about, a risk register. We really have tools that exist, right? So the algorithmic transparency reporting standard, the AI management essentials. I think all of these things just need to be brought together more holistically to figure out, like, instead of creating new things, what do you already have that we can put together in practice, like neatly package it. We know, for instance, that the EHRC, LGA, ISO, all the acronyms came together and created this this new guidance where you start to do your data processing, so your data protection impact assessments, your qualities impact assessments, and what that looks like with specific regards to AI. Now, there's a question about, we've got these tools, how do you actually put them into practice? I think these are some of the things that we can start to do. Take what already exists and actually make it operationalizable. And that means you gather the evidence of where these things are working and not working. And one of the things that colleagues of mine call for is potentially creating a what work center. Like, how do we know what's going on? But there needs to be coordination of all of these things to be able to answer some of those questions.
Fantastic, thank you. And Rachel, any concluding thoughts from you?
Thanks. I suppose that I would just like to pick up on that point that very often now you're not buying a product, but a relationship. And I suppose my question to end on is what are the new ways of working that are needed to do that and to manage that over time? We can't put more into procurement. We've heard it's full, a lot is happening there, and so how can we think adaptively over the life of a product or a tool or a relationship in order to bring some of the scrutiny to bear, in order that many of the things that Mavis was talking about around equitable outcomes can continue to be at the forefront as technologies are rolled out. So really, I suppose I'm asking, what's next?
That's an amazing note on which to end. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel for a really rich and stimulating discussion. Thank you to Albert and John and Rory for putting all of this together and doing all the practicalities behind the scenes. Obviously, this session has been recorded, and we will also transcribe the chat so that people can have access to that after the event. And I hope that we can continue some of these strands of discussion in a future POGO session, because I think this has been really interesting and exciting, and it's obviously touched a nerve for many people here. So thank you very much indeed to everybody who's taken part.